In our first chapter, we are talking about the positions where white potentially advancing a4 pawn with the idea to get even more space with a5. So after bishop b5, the typical start of Rossolimo, there are many moves here, but we are talking about knight f6, g6. It doesn't matter for us. We are talking about the structure which arises in all of them after recapturing on c6 from both sides. So let's say knight f6 here, as in the beginning of our model games. Let's go for knight f6 move, take, d3, g6, and a4. This is the white's plan, to gain as more space as possible, one of the most, or actually the most popular continuation from the white side. And here it's already very critical moment for black. Black might stop white from advancing the pawn on a5, or can allow to use the tempo for other developments. We're going to study both ways, but for instance, bishop g7, allowing pawn on a5. And next several moves are quite common and understandable. Both sides are castling, and black wants to get the normal construction with a knight on d7, potentially pawn on e5, rook on e8, knight on f8, going to be replaced by e6 to d4. And generally, for now, the knight is guarding the pawn on c5. As my advice from the white side, to get, of course, to get the knight on c4, this is the most often place for the knight in case the a pawn is advanced. And after knight c4, queen e7, white first asking for the documents from the queen, what black wants to do. We do not consider this bishop f6 move because trading the pair of bishops is missing the last counterplay of black in this position with a fixed pawn structure. So black has to play f6, a little bit weakening the structure around the king. So pawn on f6 is specific one. White provoked this f6 move, which is useful for him, and then bishop goes to e3, tickling this c5 hook. This pawn is gonna be more weak. So bishop e3 with a future continuation of white. I want to get queen to e1, queen to c3. Also in these positions, it's good that the pawn is on f6, bishop is even more locked. And if black is doing nothing, I'm playing knight fd2 and knight b3. So in general, I think that this type of the positions with pawn on a5 as the result of the opening is in white's favor. In another model game, we are studying now the black stopping white from playing a4, a5 by fixing the structure with a5. Let's go with this bishop b5, g6, bishop takes c6 opportunity. And anyway, in a few moves, it's coming to the setup with a4, a5 fixed. I think it's very interesting game between French grandmasters Maxime Lagarde and Romain Edouard. So white is, as I mentioned before, delivering the knight on c4, also preventing black from playing c4 himself. This queen c1 with the idea of bishop h6 sometimes. However, the move is really multifunctional because white doesn't show if he wants to play bishop h6 or not. Black played e5, and now it makes way less sense for playing bishop h6 because the black's knight is fully ready to occupy this f4 square. Of course, black will arrange it with f6 move, potentially bishop e6, and knight will come to f4 after trading on g7. Or I can take even with the knight back and then to replace by this maneuver knight g7, e6, and then to d4 and f4. So after seeing the pawn on e5, white decides not to go for bishop h6. And here you can stop for a second and think, what is the white's plan? And the next continuation is very interesting. White is pushing b4, and after b4, a4, a5. This is the sacrifice. Just stopping for a second, cb4 was not possible due to the hanging pawn on b6. So a4, a very typical and known sacrifice because white is aiming to get the dark squared play after capturing the pawn on c5. ba5, bishop c5, knight f4, and bishop e6. There are two moves. In case of bishop e6, then bishop d6 as important intermediate move, and only then to take this exchange and grab the pawn. I think position is unclear, but still white is a bit more preferable. Exchange is exchange. Black has compensation with a passer on a file and dark squares. So human-wise over the board, it's less clear than with engine. But let's go back after bishop c5. Black played knight f4, and white insisting the different plan. White is not going to take the exchange on f8 because, in my understanding, I actually agree with him that rook on f8 is less powerful than my dark squared bishop. So sooner or later, of course, I will probably take this exchange on h8. King h1, by the way, it was very necessary because I just didn't mention, but the fork was threatened on e2. And after king h1, f6, white is trying to find the play on the queen side. Knight b6, rook a6, take on c8, and gaining the pawn. So white definitely preferred this pawn towards the rook on f8, because with the support, let's think for 1 second. After bishop f8, bishop takes f8, let's say knight takes c8, queen takes c8. In this position, there is the combined play of black. I don't see any stopping ideas of the pawn coming to a3, and I'm sorry, this is mouse sleep, so let's show just with the arrows that the black pawn is coming to a3, or also the jumps of the knight. So knight is a good jumper. Sometimes it might be the knight h3 threats. So that was the game of the French guys, which led to a very complex, I just stop in this setup, a very complex position after white sacrificed the pawn for the dark squared play. And you can learn from these positions, from this game, that black is good to sacrifice the exchange in return, because these pawns, a5 and b4, costs the exchange. And now let's enjoy the model games of perhaps main expert in this opening, Magnus Carlsen, who really likes to develop the knight and bishop via h6 square. So he's playing this a lot, and again we are coming to the structure after exchanging on c6, and I show one of his ways to develop. So he's not, for now, he's not blocking the pawn, he's allowing to play a5 for white. His idea to develop the light squared bishop pretty fast, and then he's working with a knight from g8. Look how he played against Caruana in Toronto. Knight c4. White start potentially creating some threats, so a5 is in the air, and of course it looks that white is making some threat like b3. Afterwards the knight on c4 might be untouchable because white will take with a b pawn to c4. So Magnus immediately trades white's knight, dangerous knight, and after knight h6, I think we have to stop at this point. So white has chosen a5, quite a playable way, but maybe, as my advice, we actually have to terminate the knight on h6, because this knight is having a pretty pleasant career by all the central squares and also supporting the king's safety of black. So I advise to take on h6 to trade this knight, get some space, and bishop looks quite a dangerous piece. However, in the structure, so many pawns on the square on the bishop, which affects in negative for black. So I think that white has the potential here, after trading the rooks, to get the pleasant type of the endgames with queen and knight against the queen and bishop. So rook comes to d3, other rook might come via the third rank to b3, and then the knight starts having the career. It might be replaced to different squares, for instance, e1 to d3 potentially to attack the pawn on c5. So I think after trading on h6, this type of position is in white's favor. By the way, if white misses this moment, then it's quite easy to play for black with only knights on board, because knight f7, as I already mentioned, is very strong, and I think it has even higher potential to be transposed, to be replaced for normal squares than the knight on f3. So Magnus used this plan, bishop h6, and I think he had fully equalized the positions, so even the structure looks very similar in this example. So in other game, if we return, he tried a bit different plan. So after g6, castle, bishop g7, again the same tabia, same move orders. Just in this position, his opponent didn't play a4, played d3, queen e7, looks pretty similar, and he tried the different development. So not bishop e6 for now, not knight h6. He used the normal squares for his knight, knight on f6, very common one. Maybe he wants to admit that in this game, in this structure, he feels that rook on e1 was the unnecessary extra move, which is not helping white with the queen side played. Look how he used his chances. Rook to d8, attacking the pawn, preparing c4, and also after the rook already moved, knight is ready to start his future replacements. So white guarded the pawn because it was hanging on e4, queen c1, and now we ask how to play with black. And I think since black didn't waste time while the white probably been imprecise with the move orders like rook e1 and bishop e3 somehow combined the different move orders, I think in this situation it's just very correct from my side to advise you the opening course on Rossolimo of international master Maxim Shekachyhin. You can also find on Modern Chess, who really helps me with the technical stuff, preparing this course on the strategy. So about the move orders, you can learn from him. So for me, I just admit and I feel that queen on c1 together with rook on e1 may be a bit too slow in coordination with a5 pawn. So I usually say to my students, it's like different opera styles, different songs. So it allows black a very active play because Magnus has made all the central moves, and active play with c4 immediately attacking the white's pawn structure. The pawn on d3 is weak, and of course in case of dc4 it's very comfortable play with knight e4, and after rook a3, I think this is the strong move. We are coming to this structure c takes d3, c takes d3. In both games, world champion, I mean, this position appeared. World champion played knight h5 in his games. The other alternative by the engine is bishop g4, attacking the knight on f3, and then, as I already mentioned, to start this replacement of the knight via e8 square to c7, and you see there is another outpost for now on b5, so knight has quite a strong potential. I think black is also fine here with a complex play. Magnus tries to organize the kingside play. He's ready to sacrifice the pawn on f4 potentially to open his dark squared bishop up. So he's focusing on that side. Bishop g5 to we already seen this example in the beginning of the chapter, this idea to provoke f6 to be played, and of course with the pawn on f6 the ideas to after return, the ideas to sacrifice the pawn on f4 makes no sense because the bishop on g7 is already locked. So pay your attention to this bishop g5 provocative move to get the pawn on f6 of black and just to retreat the bishop back. Because of this reason, Magnus trades the bishops, bishop f6, queen f6, and this position happened in his match against Jan Nepomniachtchi in New York 2024. It was Rapid and Blitz World Championship. So in this position, which is quite theoretical, Nepomniachtchi tried it twice with queen c5 and queen c3. Pretty similar and pretty equal setup, but let's show queen c5, rook e8, knight d2. White is trying to get some pressure on the dark squares with the queen on c5, with the active queen, and knight delivery to c4, maybe to d6 potentially, also attacking e5 pawn and playing d4. But Magnus put the pressure on the knight on f3, so stopping white from delivering the knight on c4. He trades this knight, and now, as we can see, the knight from f3 has no potential. And one last task in this position, you will find it also in our very useful tests in the end to feel how you understand what we are talking about, to check your memory. How would you play from the black side? It's a very interesting position because structure-wise, white is slightly better. So positionally, white is slightly better. Black has weakness on a7, black has weakness on e5. White's rook is more active, queen is also active in the center and on the queen side. So potentially, if I'm dreaming, I will manage to get the rook on b3 to activate my rook from e1. Maybe I will play something like rook e3, then replace the knight, kick the black's knight out with g3. So there is a very good potential. Therefore, it's good for black to immediately organize the counterplay, and Magnus doesn't miss this moment. So b6 is really good because after capturing on b6, queen b6 immediately is problematic after rook takes a3, b8, and knight takes d3. So we are getting this position which is very interesting and very complex. I would say, like, generally, yeah, pair of rooks is a little bit better than the queen, a little bit better. However, in this setup, white has some problems with the knight on f4. So knight on f4 is too active and it's threatening to the game on both sides, also on d3 to the center, also on g2 sometimes, and rooks. The coordination is one of the most important factors together as the king safety in the positions where the queen is playing against, fighting against the pair of rooks. So the rooks are also uncoordinated and unable to create the threats. The game ended in black's favor, but the position remains very complex. Black wants to attack d3 pawn with queen d6. Also, black, in case of white's move, always ready for queen g5. I would say in case of knight e5, we can consider several options, but the main option is queen goes to d6. That's the pin, and also d3 pawn is hanging. So let's remain it as unclear, but our topic is the strategic topic, and in this chapter we fully demonstrated the ideas of black. To summarize it, black might allow to get the pawn on a5, then there is perspective development with h6 square, knight on h6, what Magnus tried, with bishop e6, white in his hand trying bishop e3, queen c1 and queen c3. In other example, black is fixing with a4, a5 and aiming to do the same as I said without a4, a5, but then the dark squares on the queen side is a little bit weaker. Here is the game of Lagarde against Romain Edouard, where white might try to push b4. So white is having some positional pressure, and as we could realize, and actually this b6 push from Magnus really gives the hope for black for the active counterplay.